Alright, Vault Hunters, let's talk about one of the coolest new faces in Borderlands 4, Harlowe the Gravitar. She's not just another gunslinging badass, Harlowe brings brains, gadgets, and a whole lot of chaos to the battlefield. With her high-tech inventions, she can clear out mobs like it's nothing, and when it comes to bigger enemies, she chips away at them with non-stop elemental damage. The best part? She's as much a support powerhouse as she is a damage dealer, so whether you're playing solo or with friends, she'll always find a way to shine. Now, what makes Harlowe really fun is the freedom you get with her elemental builds. Want to freeze the whole battlefield solid with cryo? You can do that. Prefer to melt enemies with radiation while making them light up like glow sticks? Totally an option. Or maybe you're the kind of player who likes mixing it all together to create pure elemental chaos. Harlowe's got you covered there too. In this video, we're diving into the best build setups for Harlowe, so you can get the absolute most out of her Gravitar kit and turn every fight into your personal playground. I'm quickly
Very small
moving on
portion
to the
of the
video.
audience
Before
is
we
subscribed
start,
to the
if
channel.
you enjoy these types of list
Don't
videos,
forget to
don't
subscribe
forget
if
to
you
like
like
the
these
video
types
and
of videos.
subscribe. Enjoy watching.
Thanks.
Alright, so let's talk about Harlowe the Gravitar in Borderlands 4 and what really makes her stand out when it comes to building the perfect setup. No matter which skill tree you end up leaning into, her playstyle always revolves around two big things: elemental damage and wide area of effect abilities. Sure, she can hold her own in a regular gunfight like any other Vault Hunter, but the real magic happens when she combines her action skills with her gear. That combination lets her spread status effects across entire groups of enemies and just watch the chaos unfold. Now, because Harlowe leans so heavily into elemental attacks, it should not surprise you that Maliwan weapons and gear are her bread and butter. They are practically made for her kit. While she can work with any element, she is at her absolute best when you focus on cryo or radiation. Cryo is amazing for locking enemies in place, while radiation chains through groups and keeps the battlefield messy in the best way possible. If you like seeing enemies melt or freeze while you stay in control, these elements should be your main focus. When it comes to deciding on a build, you have two main approaches. You can go the flexible route, picking a skill tree that matches how you want to play and then slotting in whatever gear you come across. Or you can commit to building entirely around a specific legendary weapon that you fall in love with once you find it. Both strategies are solid, and the fun part is that Harlowe rewards creativity. Whether you want to experiment with gear as you level up or go all in on that one legendary that feels perfect, she will keep dishing out that devastating elemental damage that makes her such a blast to play. Entanglement is the signature mechanic that really sets Harlowe apart from the other Vault Hunters in Borderlands 4. Whenever she uses one of her action skills, the enemies she hits become entangled, which you can easily spot thanks to their distorted, rainbow-colored glow. On its own, entanglement does not deal any direct damage, but here's where it gets fun. Every time you damage one entangled enemy, all the other entangled enemies take that same damage too. It is like linking them together into one big health pool. The catch is that the effect does not last very long, so timing is everything. If you can entangle a whole group and then immediately unload with your best elemental weapons, you will watch the entire crowd melt almost instantly. This makes entanglement perfect for setting up aggressive pushes or quickly clearing clustered groups of enemies. Once you get the rhythm down, action skill, entangle, push hard, you will see why Harlowe is such a powerhouse in mob fights. The radiation damage over time build, also known as the creative burst tree, is where Harlowe really starts to shine for players who love passive damage doing the heavy lifting. Her Chroma accelerator action skill is at the core of this setup, and it spreads radiation like wildfire across the battlefield. Once enemies are glowing with that sickly green hue, you can step back and let the lingering radiation effect chip away at their health while you focus on positioning and lining up your next move. For gear, your best bet is a radiation-based submachine gun, ideally one from Maliwan, since their elemental focus pairs so well with Harlowe's kit. Back that up with grenades that also deal radiation damage, and you are stacking damage over time effects faster than enemies can react. To keep your loadout flexible, you should round out the rest of your arsenal with a shotgun for close-range burst, an assault rifle for mid-range control, and a wildcard weapon of your choice. Maybe a sniper rifle if you like long-range cleanup, or a rocket launcher for those big splash moments. Of course, not every enemy in Borderlands 4 is going to melt under radiation, so it pays to have a backup plan. Maliwan weapons are especially handy here since most of them come with alternate fire modes that let you switch elements on the fly. Having a secondary element like shock or corrosive ensures you are never stuck chipping away at an enemy with the wrong damage type. With creative bursts, the goal is simple: flood the map with radiation, let the damage over time effects stack, and watch entire groups crumble while you stay 2 steps ahead. The Chroma accelerator is the centerpiece of Harlowe's creative bursts build, and it is one of those action skills that rewards smart timing and positioning. When you trigger it, there is a short charge-up period that gives you a moment to line up your shot before the accelerator launches. Once it is in the air, it creates an unstable energy pocket that moves in a straight line until it either collides with a surface, runs out of time, or you manually trigger the detonation. Every enemy it touches along the way is entangled and hit with cryo damage, which is the perfect setup for follow-up attacks. The real payoff comes when that energy pocket explodes. Whether it times out naturally or you choose to detonate it yourself, the resulting blast deals heavy radiation damage, hitting every entangled enemy in range. Because of its long fuse, you can actually let it travel across a wide stretch of the battlefield, freezing and linking enemies as it goes, before dropping the big boom at the end. This makes it incredibly versatile. It can serve as both crowd control and massive area of effect damage in one move. If you do choose to detonate it manually, just keep in mind that there is a short delay between pressing the button and the actual explosion. Harlowe needs about a second to finish her animation, so you have to anticipate where you want that blast to go. The trick is to press the button slightly ahead of time, ensuring that the detonation lands exactly where you planned. Mastering this timing is the difference between a decent use of the Chroma accelerator and a battlefield clearing nuke that wipes out an entire wave of enemies. Let's break down the key skills for Harlowe's radiation damage over time build, because this is where things really come together and make the creative bursts tree so satisfying to play. First up, fuzzy math. This one is simple but incredibly important. It boosts your chance to apply status effects by 10% per point, up to 50% total. Since this entire build is about stacking radiation and other elements to melt enemies, you need those effects to actually stick, and fuzzy math makes sure they do. Next is elementary, which buffs both your elemental damage and your status effect damage by 4% per point, up to 20%. The best part? It applies to every element, not just radiation. That means even in the early game, when you might not have the perfect radiation gear yet, fire, corrosive, and shock are still viable and get even stronger. It keeps you flexible while pushing your overall elemental output higher. Elephant's foot is a quirky one, but it can be clutch in the right setup. Whenever your shield breaks, it deals radiation damage to all entangled enemies and then grants you an overshield based on the amount of damage dealt. It only costs 1 skill point, and while it is situational, pairing it with the right shield module that has a powerful on-break effect can turn it into a strong defensive and offensive tool at the same time. Of course, if you want to maximize pure radiation output, enriched is non-negotiable. It boosts radiation damage by 7% per point, stacking up to 21%. And since this stacks directly with elementary, your radiation weapons will become absolute shredders. This skill turns radiation into the dominant element in your kit, and it is the backbone of the build. Now, Great Red damage over time is all about staying power. It makes your status effects last longer, 12% per point up to 36%. The longer those effects tick, the more total damage they deal, which is huge for drawn out fights against bosses or tough elites. If you like watching health bars slowly but surely drain away while you keep moving, this skill is a must-have. Special Purpose and Magnets upgrades your Chroma accelerator by pulling enemies along as the energy pocket travels. That means you are grouping them up for the big explosion at the end, which already deals more radiation damage for every enemy hit along the way. The end result is that your action skill becomes a moving vacuum cleaner of death, sucking up enemies before nuking them with a massive radiation blast. Then we have Poisoned Sun, and this is where the build really starts to push into everything is irradiated territory. This skill massively increases both your chance to inflict the irradiated status and your overall radiation damage, 12% and 6% per point respectively. Maxed out, that is 60% increased chance to irradiate and 30% more damage on top. Pair this with fuzzy math, and you are almost guaranteed to spread irradiation to every enemy you touch. Fissile Launcher is more of a passive bonus, but it synergizes beautifully with everything else. Once every 2 seconds, if you damage an enemy that is already entangled or irradiated, you automatically fire off a radiation dart at another nearby enemy. The dart itself is not super powerful, but it applies a radiation, which means more damage over time, more explosions, and more crowd control without you even trying. That brings us to Chain Reactor, which is another straightforward but powerful damage boost. It increases the radiation damage you deal to entangled enemies by 6% per point, up to 30%. Combine this with special purpose magnets and your Chroma accelerator's detonation will not just wipe groups, it will leave behind a few stragglers already half dead and irradiated. It is a cleanup machine in skill form. Dirty Bomb adds yet another layer of crowd control and area damage to the mix. Whenever you irradiate an enemy, it triggers a radiation explosion centered on them. That means every new application of irradiation potentially chains into more explosions, spreading even more damage and status effects across the battlefield. This is incredible for fights where minions cluster around a boss, letting you punish both at the same time. Finally, we have Demon Core, and this is where the whole tree hits its peak. With this upgrade, the Chroma accelerator fires radiation darts as it travels, and every enemy that becomes entangled is also immediately irradiated. That means they start spreading damage to each other through entanglement the moment they are touched by the energy pocket. The range goes up, the crowd control goes up, and the chain reaction potential becomes absurd. With Demon Core in play, your action skill is not just a tool, it is practically a battlefield nuke on demand. The Cosmic Brilliance build turns Harlowe into a real support powerhouse for multiplayer, giving her tools to keep teammates alive and enemies under control. Instead of leaning all the way into raw elemental damage, this setup balances cryo and radiation effects with utility and defense. You will still be freezing enemies and spreading irradiation, but the main point here is to strengthen your squad. It does mean the playstyle is a little slower and more defensive compared to her other builds, which makes it less ideal for solo runs, but in a team setting it shines. The big centerpiece here is the Flux generator, which you can place to create an anchor for defensive play. What makes it fun though is that you can actually pick it up and throw it somewhere else if the fight shifts. It is not as precise as other skills, but that mobility gives you flexibility. You can set up a safe zone for revives, lock down a choke point, or drag enemies into a frozen and radiated mess for your team to shred. The generator is all about adapting to the flow of battle, which is exactly what good support is supposed to be. When it comes to weapons and gear, you are not locked into Maliwan the way you are with Harlowe's other builds. This is the perfect excuse to dust off that Jacob's shotgun or pistol and have some fun. Since your elemental output is not the centerpiece, you can prioritize raw bullet damage alongside cryo procs to slow enemies down. Melee bonuses are surprisingly useful here as well, especially since overshield effects synergize so well with this build. Stack those defensive layers, spread cryo and radiation when you can, and let your team feel like absolute gods under your support. The Flux generator is the heart of Harlowe's Cosmic Brilliance support build, and it is what makes her such a valuable teammate in multiplayer runs. Once you drop it, the generator immediately creates a zone that benefits your allies while putting pressure on enemies. By default, teammates inside the zone gain an overshield, while enemies caught within take steady cryo damage and become entangled, which makes them vulnerable to follow-up attacks. It is like dropping a field that both strengthens your squad and weakens the opposition. What makes the Flux generator even better is its flexibility. You are not locked into keeping it in one spot. You can actually pick it up and throw it somewhere else if the fight shifts. That means you can use it to lock down a choke point, cover a teammate who is trying to revive, or set it directly in the middle of a crowd of enemies to freeze and weaken them. The ability to reposition it on the fly makes it less predictable, and it rewards quick thinking and awareness of the battlefield. Since the Flux generator's buffs are strongest inside its radius, it is usually best to group up with your team and hold ground around it. This does mean the playstyle leans more defensive and stationary, but the payoff is huge when your squad works together. Always communicate with your teammates about when and where you are deploying the generator, so everyone can get the most out of its bonuses. In the right hands, it becomes the anchor of your team's strategy, turning even tough firefights into manageable brawls. Let's dive into the key skills that make the Cosmic Brilliance build tick, because these are what transform the Flux generator from just a handy gadget into a full-on team support engine. First up is Momentum, which boosts your team's critical hit damage whenever you entangle an enemy. That is 5% per point, stacking up to 25%. And since enemies automatically get entangled when they walk into the Flux generator zone, you will be handing out a huge critical damage buff almost constantly. If you have extra points, grabbing personal observation to entangle enemies with melee hits is a nice backup when the generator is on cooldown. Next is heat death, which increases cryo efficiency by 10% per point, up to 50%. With this maxed out, enemies inside the Flux generator are just as likely to freeze solid as they are to go down from damage, which makes crowd control incredibly reliable. This skill stacks with cryo bonuses from your weapons, so pairing it with a cryo assault rifle or SMG makes for a strong primary weapon choice in this build. Confirmative reality is where the real support value starts stacking up. Every time you shoot an entangled enemy, your team gains back a small portion of their action skill cooldown. With rapid-fire weapons like SMGs or assault rifles, you can pump out a steady stream of cooldown reduction for the whole squad. In long fights, this can mean more action skill uptime across the board, which is huge for coordinated teams. Now, Absolute Zero ties directly into the cryo focus of this build. Whenever you freeze an enemy, it pauses the Flux generator's shutdown timer up to 4 seconds per enemy. Combined with heat death, freezing becomes so consistent that you can keep your Flux generator running for much longer than normal. This means more overshield time for your allies and more cryo damage ticking away at your enemies. Then there's refraction, which adds some chaotic fun to your squad's attacks. It gives all allies a chance for their shots to ricochet when hitting entangled enemies, up to 30%. Critical hits double that chance, and while the ricochet damage is halved, it still adds a lot of extra chip damage to nearby targets. The best part? Your allies do not even need to be inside the Flux generator zone to benefit. Perpetual Engine is all about keeping the generator active for as long as possible while making Harlowe tougher in the process. For every entangled enemy, you take less damage, and the Flux generator's duration extends. When combined with Absolute Zero, this makes the generator stick around far longer than its baseline, turning it into a near-permanent anchor for your team if you play it right. Distribution function is one of the most team-friendly skills in this tree. Every time an enemy takes damage from the Flux generator's field, your entire team recovers shield capacity based on the amount of damage dealt. If shields are already full, the extra goes into overshield, so no healing is wasted. The kicker is that allies do not even have to be standing in the zone to benefit. As long as the Flux generator is out there doing its job, the whole team reaps the rewards. The long cooldown on the Flux generator can be a drag, but Pencils Down helps bridge the gap. While the generator is cooling down, your team gets boosted fire rate and reload speed, up to 21%. That keeps the tempo high and ensures the squad stays effective even while waiting for the next deployment. It is a subtle buff, but it makes downtime feel much less punishing. Finally, there is Annihilation, which adds a fun twist to the Flux generator's offensive output. While active, it throws grenades, copying the grenade types of any allies in the zone if possible. This can create some wild combos if your teammates are using elemental grenades or utility grenades, since the Flux generator basically becomes an extra grenade thrower for the squad. The only catch is that you need to know what everyone is carrying so you can plan around it, but when coordinated, it adds even more firepower to your support zone. For this setup, you will want to steer clear of the group study capstone skill. While the Halo sidekick drones it provides come with strong buffs, they completely replace the Flux generator, which means you lose the overshield field, the cryo damage, and most importantly, the automatic entanglements that power nearly all of the support bonuses in this build. Without the generator, the core synergy of Cosmic Brilliance falls apart, so stick with the field if you want the build to function as intended. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.